So I'm a chemist, and the course I'm talking about today is a first year chemistry course. I realize that most people in the audience are probably not chemists, but there'll be a little bit of chemistry for you. Oh, and now my slide is not moving forward. Okay, so this is the unit I'm going to describe today. It's a fairly standard first semester chemistry unit. There's a unit like this at most universities around the world, I would say, taught in quite a traditional manner, 3 lectures per week of 1 hour, a tutorial each week, and practicals. And prior to the pandemic, we also had a fairly traditional, old-fashioned and non-programmatic assessment. So for each of the practicals, the students filled in a worksheet, which they submitted during the laboratory period. They had an online quizzes. So there was a quiz for each topic. The unit covers 10 topics and an exam at the end. And the second assessment task here is an online reflection task. So this task, I just need to describe it a little bit because later on I'll be talking about some data. For this task, the students merely need to log in to the learning management system. They need to do it twice a week. At the beginning of the week, they set a learning goal. At the end of the week, they reflect on whether they achieved their learning goal. Now, we have 1,000 students in this unit, so needless to say, we do not actually check. We just give them 0.5% if they have logged in at all and written anything. So the students don't know this, and occasionally I do go in and look at their entries, and some of them have really written very thoughtful entries about their learning goals and their reflection. So luckily they don't know that we're not reading it. And this altogether adds up to 10%. So you can see the assessment tasks on the left-hand side. Altogether, it gives us the 100% for the unit. So in March 2020, that is for us the start of semester. So we had 1 week of normal lectures, and in fact, the laboratory classes had even started. And then we were told to move everything online. So for the lectures and the tutorials, we moved to live stream. We had some interactivity in both of those formats, which I'll describe later. For the practicals, we actually developed kitchen chemistry practicals where the students could do some experiments at home in their kitchen, and we made new worksheets for that. So the assessment, well, you can see already the old assessment, the 10% for the goal setting and reflection task was already entirely online. The weekly quizzes were already entirely online. So the only parts of the assessment that changed were the practicals with the kitchen chemistry, that the students did the experiments at home, filled in a worksheet and uploaded it. And then the exam, which I'm going to talk about in detail in the second half of the talk. So we were fortunate because prior to COVID, before anyone even knew it was going to happen, for many years, I have used diagnostic surveys to profile my students at the start of semester. So the survey instrument asks them some demographic questions about their background, about their learning preferences. Then I ask them some maths questions, and I ask them some chemistry questions. And I have ethical approval from my institution to run this survey and to correlate the outcomes with the students' performance and their final outcome in the unit. So this was all done according to ethical requirements. This is an example of one of the demographic questions that we ask, where we're asking the student here why they're enrolled in this unit. Now, this unit, as I said, about 1,000 students, they are enrolled in at least 40 different degree programs. So a very different environment to a medical school where basically the students are doing the same degree. We have students doing forensic science, ecology, environmental engineering. We, of course, have a few just doing a Bachelor of Science in chemistry. We have students from nutrition. We have students who are going to become high school chemistry teachers. So a diverse group of students. Some of them are interested in chemistry and some of them are not. Almost all of them are required to do this unit. So the first 2 options for this question, they're only doing it as a course requirement, or they're interested and it's a course requirement. This covers about 99% of our students. So this gives us some measure of their motivation. And as I said, this diagnostic survey we've been using for many years. And in fact, in 2020, we'd already run it before COVID erupts, because the survey is open to the students in the week prior to teaching and in the first teaching week. And that was before we had any COVID-related changes. So we've done statistical analysis of all 3 components of the survey, and there were a few significant differences. So the group of students in 2020 was not significantly different from the group of students in 2019. And I would say our students haven't changed very much. There were a couple of questions where there were significant changes, and keep in mind, so the survey was run pre-COVID. And one of the questions we've always asked, and we've been asking this for years, is I prefer to learn in a face-to-face environment. So we have in dark orange at the top, the strongly agree, and in gray, the agree. And what you can see between 2019 and 2020, and this is actually statistically significant, that the proportion of students who are neutral on this question increased, and the proportion of students who strongly agreed decreased. So we have no hypothesis about why this might be. Again, the survey was completed before they knew they would be learning online, but that gives you some indication of how they might have felt when they were suddenly told, sorry about your preference, you are now learning online. We also asked them how important they thought that this particular course was, or this unit was. And here you can see, and remember, this is at the start of semester, and you can see vast majority of students are strongly agreeing that it's important. So that's very nice for me as a chemist to know they all think chemistry is very important. But this is actually a statistically significant drop in 2020. This proportion of strongly agrees actually dropped. And here's a typical one of the demographic questions which did not change. This question looks at their self-efficacy. So we asked them, do you expect to do very well in this unit? And you can see between 2019 and 2020, no change, and not that many students. So only around half are confident that they'll do very well. So self-efficacy is a really important measure of our students. And this is not a very nuanced measure of self-efficacy, because this survey, again, we'd had it for a long time, we've used it for many years, but later on this question became important. So I'll come back to it. Okay, so I'm just going to briefly describe the kitchen chemistry. I realize non-chemistry audience by and large, so maybe not that interesting to you, but we really enjoyed putting these pracs together. We were trying to think, so first kitchen chemistry, they were in strict lockdown. They couldn't go to the shops. We had to come up with chemistry activities that they could do with things they had at home. Salt, sugar, oil or butter, water. Everyone has a phone, so we could do a stopwatch. So these were the tasks that they did. And the focus of the practical was then learning how to make an observation, how to write scientifically, how to do an error analysis. There were some theoretical questions on the worksheets that they filled out, and they had a week to do it. And on the right-hand side, you can see we, for the first kitchen chemistry, we asked them to make a video so we could watch them doing it, and they uploaded the video. There were technical hitches with that. So for the second kitchen chemistry, we just asked them to submit a photo. So we've actually published our kitchen chemistry practicals, and they've achieved quite a lot of attention, actually. So if anyone's interested, I'm very happy to share what we did. So this was kitchen chemistry 2. They did have to go and buy a red cabbage to get these beautiful colors on the right-hand side. And there we asked, that's the publication, we asked them to submit photos of themselves. And here you can see some of the lovely photos. And I do have the students' permission to show these. You can see some of them couldn't access balloons, but they've used gloves, which were readily available during COVID. And one of the students had such a good time, he repeated the experiment with his niece, emailed me the photo. So that's what we did with our practicals. Now, I'm going to talk now about our teaching strategies. And because we had our ethical approval to correlate everything with student performance, all of these, everything I'm going to talk about has been analysed using statistics in R. I did not do the statistics, so I hope there's no technical questions. But yes, so during my lectures, I use in-class polling. We'll do one later on. So the students are actively engaged. They're asked a question, they respond. It gives them feedback on their understanding. It gives me feedback on their understanding. We used a technology that was home built within Deakin University. So the students log in with their Deakin username. So their participation in the in-class polling could be correlated with their other performance in the unit. Here's just a typical example of an in-class polling question. So on the left-hand side is the question, on the right-hand side, oh, this was actually repeated using Mentimeter, but that was 2021. 2020, we were using the homemade one. So what we were able to do is correlate how many, so about 90 in-class polling questions over the course of semester. And we could look at how many questions they attempted and how they performed overall. And what we found is a weak but statistically significant correlation. The number of questions that they engaged with, attempted, was associated with an increase in their final mark. And we, interestingly, even when they were learning online, We didn't see a drop in engagement with the in-class polling. We had the same number of students engaging and answering the questions, although the format was different. They would be sitting at home, answering the question on their computer or phone, whereas in class, they would be also answering on their phone, but they would be talking to each other about the answers. So in a more peer instruction environment. So no surprising to anyone to see this is discussion forum posts on our learning management system. So these students were struggling online. You can see between 2018, 2019, number of posts per student on the discussion forum, less than 1. 2020, it shot up, and 2021, it stayed up. And actually, I should get those numbers for 2022 now. The semester's about to end, and we can see if those numbers have stayed very high. The students were desperate for places to ask questions, and they were just posting madly on the discussion forum. We didn't see any correlation, however, between discussion forum activity and final performance. We could look at tutorial attendance, because in face-to-face tutorials, we take the role, we know who's there. Online tutorial through the learning management system, we know who's there. Not very easy to pull the information out, but we did that work. And we could look at the correlation between final score in the unit and the number of tutorials attended. So we could see here a large difference in the importance of tutorials. So the face-to-face tutorials have a big impact on final score. The online tutorials are much lower impact. We can hypothesize about the learning environment, the tutorial environment, where you're quite engaged, talking to students one-on-one. In the online format just was not as effective. We also saw, and this in every year, that the attendance over the course of the semester just plummets in tutorials and in lectures. So we can see this for the lectures. So for face-to-face, we don't have any data. We do not take the role in our in-person lectures. But with online, of course, they're logged into the learning management system. We know who's there. We know whether they're attending the live stream or watching the recording. So here you can see in blue is the number of views of the live stream. You can see it took the students a few days. So across the bottom is the week number and the lecture number. So week 1, the lectures were actually still face-to-face. So only starting in week 2, they were supposed to join the live stream if possible. And you can see the lecture recording views shot up as well. So some of them prefer the recording, some of them watch both. But we were able to then correlate, because we know who they are, we know their performance in the unit. And we found that per view, whether it be live stream or a recording, there was an increase in their final grade. So that's kind of a relief that at least there's some positive correlation, that attending lectures or viewing lectures actually increases the success. I mean, it would be pretty disheartening if that positive correlation were not found. With the weekly online quizzes, of course, there's also a drop in participation over the semester. So here, this is not the score in the quiz, this is just whether they were attempted or not. And you can see starting in week 1, we have around 90%. So here I'm showing 3 years of data. So 2019, pre-COVID, 2020, during COVID, 2021, still during COVID. And you can see the drop over the course of the semester is basically the same in each of those semesters. So all of these characteristics we know about our students, we actually have some data on them. So now this is a little bit of a complicated table, but what I'm showing you, so the 3 components of the assessment, so excluding the practicals because they were different in kind. So the quizzes were unchanged in the 2 years, the online goal setting and reflection was unchanged, and the exam we'll get to. So we can see that the impact of each of the components of assessment actually did not change when the teaching moved online. And so we've published this data if anybody's interested in the Journal of Chemical Education. Okay, now I want to talk about the exam in detail. So we wrote completely new questions. We don't use multiple choice questions in our exams. So all of the questions required the students either to input a number or a word. Those were the automatically marked questions, or they had to handwrite a full solution and upload their answer. We wrote pools of almost all of the questions. And the exam was run in a completely unsupervised environment. What I've shown here is a sort of a schematic. So AQ are the automatically marked questions. You see there were pools of questions. HW are the handwritten questions, and each student then received a randomly generated exam with 1 question out of each pool. Now, AQ1 was actually a common question that all students were asked. And when we were looking at this, so AQ was automatically marked, but we did end up looking at the responses for complicated reasons. Oh, sorry, we're just going to have a poll. So Monica's going to open. So I think on your interface where you've got chat and you've got Q&A, and then you'll have polls. So I'm hoping, because I'm not getting any feedback here. So
yes.
Hopefully...
No, we will make sure it gets there. So the question or the answers to this will be shared at the end of your session, and we can go through it. So post them in the chat for you to see.
Yeah. So if you are, I'm really, really interested to hear what's happening in other contexts. I can say that in Australia, COVID has been a bit of an impetus in a trend that was already underway, which is many things are moving online, and many of those things are unlikely to come back face to face. I can say that in other contexts, I know this is completely different. So I've spent a lot of time in Germany, and I know in Germany throughout COVID, the one thing that was prioritized was face-to-face exams. Everything else can go online, but the students are still going to come in and be invigilated and be watched and have a traditional written exam. And so I think that the contexts are quite different in different countries. So I'd be very interested to hear about your context and what's happening for you with online exams. So I'm going to tell you about our automark question, which we're calling question 1. Wasn't actually the first question, but just for simplicity. So this is a chemistry question. It's first year chemistry. I will not claim that this is at a very high intellectual level. It's essentially a memorization question. Yeah, we had taught in our teaching, we'd given them 5 different types of crystalline solids. That was in our textbook. It was in our lecture slides. Any 3 of those 5 were acceptable answers. But when we looked at the students' answers, we saw a word which was not part of our teaching, and that was the word atomic. And at first, because we're quite naive, we're a bit confused. But then we Googled and we discovered that Google tells that atomic is a type of crystalline solid. And we actually found that 35% of our students had given that answer. In fact, they'd given exactly these 3 answers: molecular, ionic, and atomic. So we then divided our students into 2 groups, and we're going to call them Googled, the ones that wrote atomic, and not Googled. And then we could do statistics on their performance in everything else in the unit. So although that exam question was worth less than 1%, you can see a large difference in exam mark, and also an interesting distribution of the Googled students. So the distribution here is a little bit perturbed. They also performed worse on the quizzes. So the students that used Google the exam had performed worse on the quizzes throughout the semester. They had also performed worse on the practicals. And most interesting to me, they'd also performed worse on the goal setting and reflection task, which is simply logging in. So Googling during the exam seems to be a measure of student engagement. So we did some more statistics. Because we had our pre-survey, we knew something about our students. We knew about their maths preparation, their chemistry preparation. We knew their university entry score from high school. We knew whether they'd studied chemistry at year 12 at the end of high school. We also had asked them these questions. Why were they enrolled? Are they interested? Did they think it was important to learn the unit? We'd asked that one question about self-efficacy. Did they expect to do well? And we also know their gender. So we did a suitable test. So these were chi-squared tests or ANOVA, and we looked for statistically significant correlations. And the factors highlighted in yellow were statistically significant. So students who were weaker in maths or chemistry or had an overall lower university entrance score were more likely to Google in the exam. Students who were not interested, like enrolled only because the unit was compulsory, were more likely to Google. However, gender was not a factor. Our measure of self-efficacy was also not a factor, and thinking it was important was not a factor. So that is what we found about our students. And we published this quite recently in Assessment and Evaluation in Higher Education. So if you're interested in more details, we have more questions that we looked at. I just very, very briefly, and I'm low on time, but I just want to also flag contract cheating. We know that 2022 is the year of contract cheating. We wrote our exam in a big hurry. We had to write all those new question pools in a hurry. We made a few spelling mistakes. We made a few typographical errors. Read this question carefully. The B has been cut off by the student when they pasted the question from their exam into the contract cheating site. But if you read the words, it says, describe how you prepare 500 ml solution. So this is a grammatical error. This is on us, but this allows us to be 100% confident that this question has been posted to the contract cheating site by our student, because no one else made that stupid mistake. We struggled to find evidence that answers from contract cheating sites were used, but we certainly know that students posted the questions. So finally, I just want to give a few reflections about our findings and what's been going on, because obviously this is a couple of years ago and now things are still moving. We have tried remote proctoring. I personally am strongly opposed to it. I don't feel that it's ethical. But we also just tried explicit instructions, just telling the students, you must not Google. If you Google, you will fail. And we saw the proportion of students using Google drop significantly. So I think that that can be recommended. It's worth telling the students that Google gets answers wrong. We found that for many of our chemistry questions. The other thing is, we know that a major factor that causes students to cheat is if they think everyone else is cheating and getting away with it. So if we tell them no one's getting away with it, if you cheat, you will be penalized, they're less likely to cheat themselves because they feel confident that others aren't benefiting. And then the biggest thing is, of course, change motivation, change our culture. They need to value learning, to be motivated to learn, and then they're less likely to cheat. So I had a little opinion piece in Nature Reviews Chemistry about this, if anyone's interested. And so the lessons for the future from our experience with online teaching and correlating our practice with student outcomes, we really feel that the face-to-face experience is very important in small groups. And if they have to be online, it's really important to try and emulate that face-to-face experience, whether it's with breakout rooms or one-on-one. That's where a lot of learning happens. We felt that the online lectures seemed to be okay. The students had the polling, they also had a chat, they could ask questions. So an interactive lecture experience can be effective. And then about cheating, I guess I've already said. So I guess our overall goal is motivate students. They want to learn for learning's sake, not just to pass, to tick a box. Then they will learn more. So just acknowledge my colleagues. So Damien and I were the ones thrown into the COVID pool together in 2020. So we spent a lot of time Zooming. Kieran's another colleague from Deakin who's worked in this area. And Anna, who's pictured doing her PhD work there, she's actually did all the statistics for us. Andrew and Nick were helped with the cheating manuscript. And of course, we're grateful to our students who were incredibly patient and stuck with it, with ever-changing restrictions, uncertainties, and and thank you very much for your attention. And I'm a bit over time, but hopefully there's time for a question.
Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah, thank you so much, Madeleine, for sharing with us all this insightful data. It was amazing to see all the analysis that you have done before, during, and after the pandemic regarding the student engagement. I have to say it's really, really amazing. And also it's great that you as well kept in mind the students' opinion throughout the entire course, and it's inspiring to see all the creativity that went into the kitchen chemistry course. That is great. Taking a look at the time, I think that we're a bit short for questions. We have to jump into the next session, but we can gather the poll results and also answer some of the questions of the chat synchronously. For the poll, are you likely to run exams online in the future? We got that 66.7% of the attendees would run exams online in the future, say yes to that. And then we have a 26% who said maybe, that it depends in the future to run these exams online.
Thank you.
Is this what you were thinking of, Madeleine?
That's higher than I expected, actually. But yeah, I guess it depends who's responding.